Okay, so today I'm talking about Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 13, and our guest speaker, who is Dr. Honeycutt, who I really enjoyed. Chapter 1 talks about assessment and classroom decisions. Decisions involve using different kinds of information, so there are tons of different kinds of information that decisions are based off of. Some good decisions are what to teach, how to teach it, and how to evaluate students' achievement. There are different ways to evaluate the students' achievement. There are different ways to teach each lesson, and there are different ways to figure out what you want to teach. Which all pretty much go back to the state standards. Successful teachers obtain information about their students from high-quality assessments. Assessment involves more than testing and grading students. There's more to assessment than just grading your students. You can watch your students, you can go around, you can just make sure that your students are understanding it, because if they don't understand it, then that's going to show on you, and that's going to be your fault, not your students' fault. It involves gathering and using information to improve your teaching and your students' learning. So, the next subheading is assessment and educational decisions about students. It provides information for decisions about students, schools, curriculum, programs, and educational policies. Instructional decisions. Teachers make decisions about students at the rate of 1 every 2 to 3 minutes, and about 20 decisions are made every class period. So if you think about 1 decision every 2 to 3 minutes, 20 decisions a class period, you have 8 class periods a day, respectively. And then you have 5 days in a week. Just think of how many decisions as a teacher that we're going to be making, which I think is awesome, and I think that it's crazy that that many decisions are made just in that short of a period of time. And teachers may spend from 1/3 to 1/2 of their time in assessment-related activities, which I think is a really key tool for your students, because your students aren't going to be able to just learn if you're reading from a book. You have to be able to take them into an assessment, or just be able to show them different things. A set of questions teachers must answer before, during, and after teaching. So there's a set of questions for before you teach, during, while you're teaching, and after you're teaching, and it was super long, but it's just different. In each question, there's probably 7 questions per before, during, and after, and they pretty much just they ask the question that gives you some ideas of what you can do for that question. Like, I honestly can't remember, because there was so much information in all these chapters, but I know in the before it may ask what is your student to learn, and you can go and you can do a pretest. And modeling learning expectations. Students can compare their current performance with desired performance. So they can think about how they would like their outcome to be, and then they can set a goal for that. Tests are an instrument or systematic procedure for observing and describing one or more characteristics of a student using either a numerical scale or a classification scheme. That is a big sentence. I'm not a fan of tests. I never have been. I think that there's a better way to go about teaching your students, and I know that tests are sometimes the only thing that you can do, and I know that for standardized tests, they're absolutely what you have to be able to realize where your students are, but I think that there are other ways that you can do for your students. And then evaluation is the process of making a valued judgment about the worth of a student's product or performance, and that's all on the teacher. You can evaluate how you think they're going to do, or you can evaluate their type of work, and if you think that it's subpar, if it goes with how you would like it to have been taught. Now Chapter 2, and the first heading is Learning Objective, and Learning Objective specifies what you would like students to achieve when they have completed an instructional segment. So you should have your learning objective posted in your classroom every day, and so that the students can see it, along with your standards posted, and you need to go over it with your students so that they understand. And the importance of specifying outcomes is deciding what students are to learn, carrying out the actual instruction, and evaluating the learning. That's really important in a classroom setting for not only your students, but for you too. It keeps you on task and your students on task. State Common Core. I know a lot of people cringe when somebody says anything about Common Core, but State Common Core, most states use Common Core state standards in English, language, arts, and math, as 85% or more of their state standards in these 2 areas. They're organized by grade level from K through 8 and by topic for high school. And I read that there are 5 different subcategories for reading. So it's a huge thing that's helpful for teachers and just helps a teacher be able to base her lessons off of and help her students to achieve for that grade level to be able to go on to the next grade level and understand what's going to happen there. Creating assessments. It's important to create learning and assessment situations that require students to use combinations of specific skills and knowledge to perform complex tasks and solve real-life problems. Creating assessments is one of the biggest things that a teacher can do. There's so many different kinds of assessments that you can use, and it's so supplemental to your children. Educational learning objectives fall into one of 3 domains: cognitive domain, affective domain, and psychomotor domain. The revised Bloom taxonomy. There was an original Bloom's taxonomy and they decided to revise it, and down here it says that it's exactly like Bloom's taxonomy with the exception of knowledge. The revised taxonomy improves on the original. The 2 dimensions are the knowledge dimension and the cognitive process dimension. Categories are to remember, to understand, to apply, to analyze, to evaluate, and to create. The original knowledge category has been divided into 2 parts, which is the knowledge dimension and the cognitive processing category to remember. So they've broken it down even more than what they had it broken down, and it's better for students to understand and for educators to be able to use. So for Chapter 13, performance assessment, they require students to create a product or to demonstrate a process or both. They use clearly defined criteria to evaluate the qualities of student work. They require students to do something with their knowledge, and they must have 2 components. So performance assessments are really important to use within a classroom. There are so many different types of assessment, but performance assessment really bring out your children, and just they get your children to come out of their comfort zone, I think. A performance task is an assessment activity that requires students to demonstrate their achievement by producing an extended written or spoken answer, by engaging in group or individual activities, or by creating a specific product. And so down here I talk more in detail about what that whole sentence is saying. They typically require direct demonstration. Sometimes they're called alternative assessment or authentic assessment. Your performance assessment should match your learning objectives always. They always have to match your learning objectives, or you're just having your students do nothing for no reason. Your rubrics evaluate those same learning objectives. So your rubrics should be able to evaluate those objectives, and they should be able to look at the assessment and just be able to check down a list if you're doing a checklist, or with the rubric from no understanding to excellent understanding. You should be able to easily be able to use the whatever you do for that type of thing. Paper and pencil tasks, they are constructed responses and essay items and permit students not only to record their answers. So paper and pencil tasks, they're kind of like, I don't want to say that they're tests because they're not tests. They're just response and essay items that the students are given a chance to just do in class and then go over it with the teacher. Experiments are on-demand performance in which a student plans, conducts, and interprets the results of an empirical research study. So I know in elementary school, I don't know if every elementary school did it, but my elementary school did, and in middle school. In elementary school we made volcanoes, and in middle school we made rockets. And we shot our rockets off for the entire school to see, and it was just an entire school incorporated thing, and it was really cool that we got to see our rockets fly up in the air, but other children also got to learn about rockets, and we got to learn about gravity, and we learned about how to construct the rocket and what would happen if it wasn't constructed correct, and it was done for a grade, but I think it was a really cool thing to do. Oral presentations and dramatizations. They permit students to verbalize their knowledge and use their oral skills in the form of interviews, speeches, and oral presentations. This isn't always the best thing to use, I believe, because I know that a lot of students are really shy and they don't want to get up in front of other students, and I know that they say that if you make a student do it, then they'll get out of their shyness, but some students, they won't. I'm not a shy person to an extent, but I still have moments where I cringe when I'm told I have to do an oral presentation, or when we have to do a PowerPoint. Debates are a special type of oral performance, and debates pit one student against the other. So one student is told that they're for whatever they're debating, and one student is told that they're against whatever they're debating, and they have to fight. Even if they don't believe it, they have to fight for whichever part of the debate that they were given. And whoever has the best debate, pretty much, they win the debate. Forensic activities and dramatizations, and that can be like a play or something. Rubrics are coherent sets of criteria for students' work that include descriptions of levels of performance equality on the criteria. So a rubric can say from no understanding, some understanding, little understanding, great understanding, excelled understanding. A rubric can go from 0 to 5. It can go even more in depth than that. It's showing your children's understanding, and it's easier for you to be able to grade for your students. Checklists consist of a list of specific behaviors, characteristics, or activities, and a place for marking whether each is present or absent. Procedure checklists are a type of checklist, and product checklists are another type. Students can check to make sure that their own assessments meet all the requirements, or peers can do this, so that it's not only a student-based thing, it can also be where you can have a peer get involved, and just to make sure that they're not just checking down. That kind of sounded funny. Sorry. That they're not just checking down the row, and to make sure that they're actually really getting into their assignment, and to make sure that they're on task. And rating scales are assess the degree to which students have attained the achievement dimension in the performance task. It uses a frequency scale or an intensity scale, and rating scales are particularly useful for evaluating work habits and learning skills. I think rating scales are a really good thing to use, or rating scales. And then portfolios. Portfolios differ enough from from other types that they are discussed separately. A limited collection of a student's work used either to present the student's best work or to demonstrate the student's educational growth over a given time. Growth portfolios work best when integrated fully into your teaching, and they can quickly become a mess of materials and paper that is difficult to assess. I love the ideas of portfolios. I think they're a great thing. I think that you can have your students start putting their work into a portfolio that they think is their best work, and then just so they can see how much they progress throughout the year. But it also can become a crazy mess if you don't stay on top of it with your students. So, from our guest speaker's notes, I took, when you see one good test score compared to another bad test score, you think differently of the child. So if you see a student that has made an 850 out of 900 on math, you think, oh, this is a genius child. This is about to be the easiest year ever with this child. And then you see that they have a 250 out of 900 in reading, which was the example that was given. And you're just like, what happened to this child? How did they have that high in math? And then you start to be like, oh, I'm stuck with this kid. And it changes your outlook on the students. And you can see data, but until you triangulate the child, you don't know what it means. And trend data is scores or data collected over a period of time. I didn't know what trend data was until our guest speaker came, but I'm a firm believer in trend data now. It's your fault if your child doesn't understand the work you're doing. You have to go through and you have to reteach, and you can have somebody else come in and teach, but if you don't go that far into the process, then it's your fault that your child doesn't understand it. You have to know what you're testing because it becomes a piece of your triangulation. Go talk to another teacher to help you teach a lesson your class isn't grasping. One of the things we talked about was if the kids just can't comprehend how many legs a dog has, then have a different teacher come in that's an expert on the amount of legs a dog has. And maybe they'll teach it a different way where your kids will understand it. And develop test blueprints, and you're able to collect trend data continuously. I love the idea of test blueprints now. I think that it's such a cool idea. I know it's so long and it's such a tedious process, but I think that it gives you so much documentation, and if you have to defend yourself, you have something to cover your butt with. After documentation and multiple reteaches, it's no longer your fault. You can give a pre-test to see how much your students know before the test. Tests need 5 years of trend data for it to be valued and reliable. It also, what she said was, it needs 5 years of trend data to put a school into academic distress. Triangulation of data parts are standardized test scores, information from many people, and previous test scores. That's one corner of it. And then documentation of instruction. So you have proof of your documentation so that a parent can't come to you and say, well, you didn't teach my child this. My child failed because of you. You have documentation that you taught it and that you've done all this for your students. So that's all that I took from all four of these different things that we learned about this in these past couple of weeks.